So hello friends, today I thought of us looking on object-oriented programming in the JavaScript way. JavaScript does not have a lot of inbuilt object-oriented features, but you can always check on that using a language like TypeScript. But for now, let us have an understanding of how it really works. So with that said, you can feel free to code all along, because that is the best way to understand anything. Coding while someone is explaining. For beginners, it's very beginner friendly. So we are going to know how these things work out. So we are going to start from the minimalistic level, and I'm going to explain everything minimalistically. So with that said, I can come. I had already created a folder called classes. Maybe I can remove classes. Then we can maybe make directory classes. Then after making that directory, we cd in classes. Then we can now open okay, let's see, code. Then with this set, you can now remove that. Then you can now open this. So let us look at how we do object-oriented programming in JavaScript. Therein, JavaScript does not have so much features of object-oriented programming, but you can always extend that using TypeScript or anything, or Python. But for now, let's look at how we do it in JavaScript way. So with that, I'm going to create a first file. I'm going to call it objects1.js. Objects, then I'm going to rename, call it objects. Then with this set, I'm going to say const. Now, when I'm dealing with the JavaScript, object-oriented programming came from this. You begin it from, if you want to understand it, you begin it from something you call objects. And this is how we define an object. This is the syntax. So this is the syntax. You give it, so you define the object. It can either be a person, it can either be a car, that way. For our case, you have used a person. Then with that, this object received keys. These keys are unique. So we have a key there called name. This name can be Dennis Peter. Let's say Dennis Peter Munyao. Then we have a phone number here. Now this one is a key, and this key has to be unique. So I can just put some random numbers there. Then we have an email. This email has to be unique. So I can say dennis@gmail.com. Then you can come and say ID number. Then you repeat this. You repeat this here. You can copy it. This one will work. This will work, but this cannot work. When you copy this, when you copy the phone number and bring it here, phone number. Now, this one will not work because keys are unique. Values can be repeated, but keys are unique. So in that said, let's say we have now name. We have a key called name, Dennis. We have phone number, that. We have an email, that. These values, these that are denoted with the yellow color are values. Denoted with the white, they are keys and repeated. So we can now come and say, can come up with something like a function, maybe say study. maybe let's say there's another key here called course. Then you say computer science. Then you can now say, let's say we have study. This guy studies. To receive a function like that, studies what? Can now say console.log. Now, what we do inside this function, inside this object, we access these values using a keyword called this. You say this dot name. This dot name studies with, let's say, with email, this dot email studies this dot course, like that. Now we have already defined our object. This one is an object. How do we access anything in this object? We say, if we want to access something like name, we say console.log person.name. Then we can now run and see what will happen. Say, we list and say node objects. Now we have accessed that name. The name is Dennis Peter. We have accessed it. Now, let's say we want to access this method. How do we do it? You can say person.study. That's it. I can now execute Dennis Peter Munyao with email studies. You see, now this one is working. But you see, there is a more better way to do this work. There is a more better way to do this work. Which is the way? This is the way. Now, imagine you were the different persons. Imagine you were the like 10 persons. Will you keep on saying person 1? Will you say person 1, then you keep on copying. Then you copy, you paste here, then you change these ones, you turn it to person 2, person 3. You see, this one is tedious. But for us to be able to do this, there is a more different way which we can do this, and we can make our work easier. Now, let me undo and remain with our first one, this. Now, a more excellent way we do this. Let me say objects2.js. A more excellent way we do this. We say there's something we call function constructors. Now, this was before ES6. That was before ES6. This was before ES6. Now, how was this one done? This was done this way. You have something like you have a function, then you define a constructor, function constructor. You have a function there, then you define, you can split here and pull. We see this here. We want to copy this exactly here, but using a more excellent way. Function, then we say this one was person. This was supposed to be person. Now you see function person. Function person. This will receive name, receive phone number, receive email, or receive course. That way. Now what we say, this will receive this. What is a constructor? A constructor is I can call it a class function that is called when that is automatically invoked when an object is instantiated. I will explain that. Now, we want to define a variable inside this constructor. You say this, we use this keyword, this dot name, if variable, this name called name, this variable called name will access this from the parameter. Then this dot phone number is equals to phone number. Then this dot email is equals to email. It's equals to email. Then this dot course is equals to course. Now we want to define a function inside here. We want to define a function. Now, how do we define that function? You say this dot study function. This dot study is equals to function is equals to which function? Now we copy this exactly, that one. We copy it exactly. Then I can terminate that. Then I put it here. Then with that said, I can maybe, you see, this dot name, this dot phone number, this. Now, we want now to have this data here. Now, what we do is we define an object. This one is a constructor function. So we define an object. We call this object, we say const John. John is equals to new person. New person. This new person, as a, we can now come and say, can come and pull this person, this object this way, can copy this, then you can paste here, can say const, or let's just use this, can say const person is equals to name is equals to Dennis Peter Manyao, like that. Then email, then phone number, can have numbers like any number. Then you can have something like email is equals to dennis@gmail.com. That is not my email, it's just an email to show how this one works. Then you can have, of course, maybe something like computer science. Now what is happening? What is happening is very simple. This is a constructor. It will be called upon the object instantiation. Now we have instantiated this object. Now this constructor, when we call this constructor with a new keyword, what will happen? It will directly invoke everything here, and it will embed these values where necessary. So I can say console.log. Let's say we want to know the value of the name of John. Can say what course does John study? Can say course John.course, John.course, that way. Then with that set, I can maybe run, can list, see, then node objects objects 2. So this person studies computer science. Now what we have done, simply we have accessed this course. Now let's say we want this function, we want to access it. Can now say console.log John.study. But you don't have to do that. Let's see this John.study. Dennis Peter Munyao with email studies. Now this is supposed to be, you should have put something like John, so that it can make more sense. John, then this you can put something like John, can make more sense. I can now execute it. John with email, John at studies. Now, what we can now do, maybe we want maybe several Johns, one several people. So what we can do, you can maybe remove this and copy this. Say, this is called Ross. Can delete, put it Ross, and put this Ross. Then you can remove this. Can give this one to be something like can give it something like Maggie, Magdalene, Maggie. Let's say something like Maggie. Then with this we can say can put Maggie. Then I can now say this this John can say something like Cinti. Can maybe use we have used, you can say something like Alex. Now with that said, I can say, now this one is called to Alex again. So I can say, I can copy this and I say copy it. Then I can say Rose. Then I can say Maggie. Then I can say Alex. So what will happen, I can now come here and execute it. So you can see this one is a little bit easier. We have been able to define all of this using a symbol object, using a symbol constructor function. We have been able to define all of this using this function. Unlike in the beginning, this, which I had now to copy this, which I had to copy this maybe for several people, which I had to copy maybe for John, for Ross, for Moente, like that. What happens is when we are defining this way, it makes our work much easier. Now, this was before year 6. This is function constructors. Now, let's see after year 6 what happened after year 6. After year 6. Meanwhile, there is another way. You can say, you can maybe use something, you can come and use something you call prototypes. There is something you call prototypes. You can interact with this. You can say prototypes. Then I can say JS. And with that, I can say, I can now copy this. I can now copy that. I can terminate everything. Then I can open prototypes. Then I can place it here. Like that. Then I can say, person dot, this person I can give it something like a value like can say person dot prototype, give it a value like person dot prototype cars is equals to, maybe you want to know the number of cars this person has. You have 2. Then I can say console.log. No, I can come here and say, can copy this. Can come here and copy this. Let's say, come here and copy that. Then I can say console.log john.cars, like that. And I can now run. Let's see. We are running, you're supposed to run prototypes at us2. So this prototype is a method that gives us a very good way in which we can interact with our maybe constructor functions. And this one is very good for memory utilization. When you are using something like prototypes, it's very good for memory utilization. So we can maybe come and define something like you can say person, dot running, person dot prototype dot running, say person dot prototype dot running is equals to a function which you can say a console dot log, can say this, then you can access this, and say this dot name is running at a speed of 90 kilometers per hour. Then with that set, I can now come and say John dot running. Then I can execute that. John is running at a speed of. So this is using prototypes is a better memory utilization way for interacting with our constructors. But what you have to understand is just understand how it flows as in a moment, and then you will understand more it deeper. So with that said, I can now check how we interact with this in the ES6 way. So I can say objects 3 dot JS. Now with that said, I can now open object 2 here. So with this object 2, I can define it in ES6 way. I can say class person is equals to, now in ES6 way we use classes. ES6 way you use classes. Now this class I can say const class, we define it using classes, class person. This class person, we define it that way. Then with this we can now say class person. Can now come up with our own constructor. I said this is a method that is called when an object is being instantiated. At that point, when object is being instantiated, we call this constructor. We call this function. Then as I can say constructor, then I can copy exactly this and paste it here. Then with that, I can say, with that set, I can copy this also and paste it here. Paste it there. Then I can now say, can copy this, and copy this, can terminate this, terminate that, and paste it here. So I can say, can now remove this. I can say study is equals to that. This one is okay. This is a function you have defined, but let's us use a ES6 way. Can use an arrow function there. Can say, so we have this study, then we have this person. Then I can now come here and say, I can copy these objects 2. I can exactly copy this and paste it here. Then I can maybe paste it here. So this is exactly like this. this is exactly like this way, but this one is on the ES6 way. This one is on the ES6 way. So if I can run it, object 3, node objects 3. Let's say, have I consult? No, I have not consult. I have not said John. I can say John study. John dot study. And with that I can maybe duplicate that. And this I can change to Ross. This I can change to Maggie. Then this I can change to Alex. Then I can now execute this. And you see this one is exactly like this. Like this one is exactly like this is exactly like this. So this is exactly like this, only that we have used the ES6 way. We have used the ES6 way. Now, with this ES6 way, there are different things we can now come and say. We can define a private variable, we can define a protected variable, and a public variable. Now, this is a public variable. And like I said in the beginning, JavaScript does not have so much inbuilt features of object-oriented programming. But there is a way with ES6 way we can come up with something that looks like that. So we will see that when you are using TypeScript. Now this is public. These are public. These are public. Maybe I can delete this to work with one object. Then I can say console.log John.name. Then I can now run, and you see John.name is equals to John. Now this is public. This is the reason why we can access it outside. It is because we are accessing this variable because it is in a public mode. This variable is in a public mode, but you can convert it to a private. Now, that is called encapsulation. That is called encapsulation. That is protecting some members from being accessed in a certain scope. That is encapsulation. If I say, let's say encapsulate JS, that, and I define maybe class, and I maybe, because I can just copy this, I can copy this and paste it here. Then we can now say, with this, I can now come here and say, what? Can now come here and add something like hash there. Come here and say, let me add something like that. Let's now try to access it again. Let's try to access this variable again and see what will be the outcome. Let's see something I want to see. We have something. Let's see. Let me come up with something, a variable like let's say this dot id is equals to null. Let's say this dot id let's come here and say, let's come here and put something like id. This dot id is equals to id. Let me add id there. Equals to id. see. Let's say, okay, I get it. Let's say, let's copy that and say, let's have, let me copy this and paste it here. Let's say this ID, let's say I have something like, I have this, I have ID here. Say, ID is equals to this. Let's say you have a function here called, let's say you have a function called helper. Let's say you have a function called, let's say you have a function called maybe, let me say, let's say you have money. Let's say you have something like, we have money, say this dot money is equals to money. Let's say, let me call this money. Let's say deposit. Let me call it deposit. Deposit, and say this dot deposit. This dot deposit is equals to deposit this way. Then I can come up with another function, can say get deposits. Get deposits that way. Then I can say get which deposits. I can say this console.log this dot name as, let's say as let's say this dot deposit money in the account, like that. Then with that said, I can now come here and say what? I can now come here and say this John, I'm going to give him something like we want to deposit maybe, let's say 70,000. 1, 2, 3, 70,000. And we want now to do what? We want to access this 70,000. You can say, we want to know how much does he ask. So you can say John dot hash get deposits. John hash get deposits. Can do that. Let's see what will happen. Then you can say objects can remove this, get money and say this get money will give us this dot hash get deposits, like that. Then with that, I can now come here and say get money, like that. There's something I want to explain, then I can run. It's encapsulate node let's see, node so John has 70,000 money in the account, supposed to be encapsulate. Rename and encapsulate, like that. Node encapsulate node as, so John has 70,000 money in the account. Now I wanted to demonstrate something. If I come here and say John dot hash get deposits, if I copy this and bring it here, if I say this John get deposits and I run, you see, if I come here and comment this, if I come here and comment that, if I try to run it, this cannot work. This cannot work because what is simply happening is I'm trying to access a private method. I'm trying to access a private method. Now, how do that private thing work? It works this way. Private variables or private methods, they are only called within the class. A protected variable can be called in a class that has inherited our base class. But trying to access this, now when you are trying to access any private member of a class, you either use a method inside that class. You cannot access it directly like you have done here, but you cannot access it directly like you have done here, but you can comment this and you can access indirectly through a certain method like this, like that. So you can access it through this method like that. And so with that, we can now come here and say, maybe you can now come here and say something like inheritance. Let's say inheritance.js. Then we can now come here and define. We look at how different classes can relate with other classes. Can now come there and say what? Inheritance. Now, this is how different classes can maybe obtain members from other classes. And how does it go? Class, let's say class car, can say constructor. This as a model, as a brand, let's say as wheels, as a model and as a brand. I can say this dot model is equals to model, then this dot brand is equals to brand. I can say console can now say get car and say console.log. This can say this dot model as is of type is of type this dot brand. Now if I come here and say const Lexus is equals to const Lexus is equals to model, I can say model is Lexus, then I can say Lexus, and I can say LX570 that way. Then I can now say new car. What we are doing is we are defining this object. Then I can say Lexus dot get car. With that we can now run by saying node inheritance. Lexus is of type LX570. Now that one is working. Now let's say we have another car called maybe a Mercedes-Benz, or we have another something that resembles a car. How do we do that? We say class maybe let's say Tesla, class Tesla extends car, class Tesla extends car. Now here we have to define a constructor, and this constructor takes model, takes brand, and it takes something like batteries. Now with this constructor, now when you are doing inheritance in JavaScript, there's something called super keyword. This super keyword gives us the ability to inherit objects from the base class. If I say super model, I say brand, I say console.log, and I say that one is working nicely. And I come here and say const Tesla is equals to new Tesla, and I give it model Tesla, give it something like S, and I can say let's say S. Then I can now come here and say what? Console, say Tesla dot get car. So what has happened? This Tesla dot get car, it comes now to get this because it has extended this car. It has inherited the methods in this car. If I run, say Tesla is of type S because it has inherited the variables of the above car, of this car. So this Tesla can also be inherited. This Tesla can also be inherited. You can say class maybe Mercedes, can say extends Tesla, can say constructor, and say model brand, and say model brand. Now with this we want to, you can say super, because we want to be able to inherit our functions in this. You can say super model brands, model brand. Then I can now say const Mercedes is equals to new Mercedes. Then you can now call our constructor by invoking some, you can say Mercedes, let's say mod brand, let's say brand T. Then I can now come here and say Mercedes. Then I can now say get car. We get in car. Remember this has inherited from Tesla, and Tesla has inherited our get car. Then I can now come here and say now run. Mercedes is of type T. So this is inheritance. This is inheritance. However, when you are doing this stuff, when you are doing this, there are some things you should take seriously. If I come with index.txt, number one should be, you'd always use, you should always, I just want to put the things that you should emphasize on. You use classes instead of constructors. Use classes instead of constructors for better readability. Use classes instead of function constructors for better readability. Then use prototypes. Use prototypes to avoid duplicate methods. Duplicate in instances. Then keep data protected using hash closures. Then use inheritance wisely to avoid deep inheritance chains. Then the other one is you follow the solid principles. Solid principles, that is single responsibility. I will have a separate video, maybe using TypeScript, because it is more advanced when it comes to object-oriented features. Then we can digest into these solid principles. But I will maybe pass through. I will just brush. Then we have Liskov substitution principle. Substitution principle. Of course, here we have open closed principle. Open closed principle. Then here we have interface segregation principle. Then here we have dependency inversion principle. Inversion principle. So what will happen is I will come up with a separate video, maybe explaining these solid principles. They are key when you are dealing with any object-oriented system. But what is more important, you have to master these four. Use classes instead of functions constructors for better readability, like we saw here, objects 2. We have this, then we have objects 3. You see, this one is more readable. So use classes for better readability. Then use prototypes to avoid duplicates methods in instances. Use prototypes to avoid duplicate methods in instances. Keep data protected using hash closures. Use inheritance wisely to avoid deep inheritance chains. Then you follow the solid principles. This I will have a separate tutorial using TypeScript to explain this. So with that said, maybe you can subscribe for more stuff like this, as we seek to grow and enlighten each other. Have a nice day.